celebration of life. I am so touched that you're all here. I know that some of you came from far away, and even if you're close, you know it's not easy to get around this town. Thank you for showing up today. I especially want to acknowledge John's family, who traveled from quite a distance to be here from a number of different states. They're all from out of state, and I do want to just say their names so you can hear them. His nephew, Tony Saunders, is here. His sister, Helga McGreal, is here. His niece, Kelly McGreal, grandniece, Cammie McGreal, niece, Jessica Moore, and husband, Tom, and niece, Becky Aalto. John was really close with his families and family members, and I know a lot of you are friends of his, and you know how much John valued friendship. And that was one of the first things that really attracted me to him. When I first met him, I happened to meet him at a UCLA extension course, and I was there to actually learn something, and he was there to meet women. And he told me that later. He said, I scored, I got my goal. And we both did. We both learned something. But one of the first things I learned about him was that how much he respected women. And that was so attractive to me. And I don't know, those of you who know him, that you got this sense of him. He remained lifelong friends with his ex-girlfriends. Who does that, right? And you guys, 2 of them are here in this room today. And you know who you are, still friends after all this time, right? And this was who he was. He was kind of a better person than I was, and I was really lucky to meet him because he had such a moral compass. I always sort of aspired to be him as I lived with him, and I adored him. So enough about us. I want to share him with you via the perspectives of other people who knew him well. And I know a lot of you have stories about him, and if you ever want to share with me, I would be glad to hear them from you because I love stories. But we have several people here today who, and I hope you've seen the card, who will be talking about John for a few minutes. And I just want to say their names now. Hopefully they'll repeat their names when they come up and talk, so you'll remember. But they are Chuck Phelan, Brennis Wagoner, Phil Ringstrom, Wendy Van Norden, Terry Prasant, and Laura Braverman. And they'll each talk about their particular relationship and experience with John. And they're all very unique. I think I can speak for a lot of us, all of us. We were really fortunate to know him. He was a unique individual, and it's a testament to how much he was loved that you are all here today. Thank you so much. And so now, Chuck Phelan. Thank you.
Anyway, I want to acknowledge that our 2 most distant travelers who arrived only about an hour ago, Diane and Bill Colangelo, who flew in this morning from Poland. And also, so they made a great effort to get here. And I know we have people online from all over, including Finland and around the United States. So welcome to everyone. Forgive the notes, but there's a lot of client names in here that I wouldn't necessarily remember or get right if I didn't have notes. I'm one of the 3 founders of National Teleconsultants, and the other 2, Elliot Graham and Peter Damiak, unfortunately couldn't be here today. So Mary asked me if I would share with you some of the things that John did that were very, very important to NTC. And there are a lot of NTC family members and a couple of clients here today. NTC was first founded in 1981, and John joined our family in 1986. So when he finally retired in 2014, he had been with the company ever since its founding, save the first 5 years. He was very instrumental and worked with us for 28 years before his retirement. He led our A&E, which stands for Architectural and Engineering Practice, and he led many of our A&E projects. And A&E work was his passion, and he did it really, really well. I know a lot of you that are here, both clients and other NTC staff, know that. He worked with more than 100 clients during his years with NTC, and they included studios like Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers. They included television networks, including ABC, NBC, PBS, and Fox, and cable networks like ESPN, CNN, BET, Turner, Discovery, and Nickelodeon. pretty much a who's who of the broadcast industry. And he led projects for state broadcasters, especially one I remember well, the Wisconsin Public Broadcasting Network, and also Kentucky Educational Television in Lexington. He worked with international broadcasters, including TV3 in New Zealand, TVB in Hong Kong, and there'll be more about that in just a moment, and Optus Vision in Australia, as well as Abu Dhabi Media Center and TV Globo in Brazil. I know this is a long list and it's going to go on for a minute or so more, no more. But I want to stress how important John was to the company over his 28-year history. These are all the people he worked with and the projects he worked on. TV stations like KQED and KRON in San Francisco, Fox TV stations, WTTG in Washington, D.C., and Channel 11 here in Los Angeles. These were all projects that John led or made significant technical contributions to. Production and post-production facilities like Post Perfect in New York and Time Telepictures here in Glendale. He was project lead at schools such as San Diego State University, Southern Methodist University, LA Harbor College, Syracuse University, and Columbia in New York. And lastly, he led project work at entertainment venues that included the Walt Disney Concert Hall, the Oscars Theater, now the Dolby Theater, Hollywood and Highland. I always say that's the biggest project NCC ever did with not one single wire in it. Those who may remember the project is we were installing cableways for broadcasters to come in to broadcast the Olympics each year. So we had miles of cableway, not a single wire. Those all had to be laid by the people that came afterwards. Walt Disney World in Florida was another one, and Disneyland, both in Anaheim and in Paris, Euro Disneyland. John had many roles at NTC, including the roles I've talked about in A&E and technology as a project leader. He was a mentor to many of our younger NTC staff, and importantly, he was NTC's videographer. How many people remember that? He was always taking videos. Peter remembers the many times John recorded video meetings so that people that couldn't attend them would still be able to see the content. And remember, this was before the days of Zoom and YouTube, so we didn't have these things. He also produced videos for special events at the company and at the end of many projects, project closeout videos. John really grew and enhanced NTC's project management skills, working with organizations like PSMJ for their project management boot camp. He did an enormous amount of traveling also, traveling to Paris for Euro Disneyland, to Auckland for TV3, to Sydney for Optus Vision, amongst many others. But the granddaddy of them all was the time that he was stranded in Hong Kong for almost 2 weeks during 9/11. He couldn't get back. And after extending his trip by a week and a half more than he had expected, he finally came home to Mary and Will. And Mary was really glad to get him back, I'm sure. So, you know, if you're thinking and getting the idea that John was instrumental to NTC's success, you're darn tootin' he was. You're right. He was very important to the company and to the people from the company that are here. Company would not have grown like it did without his skills, commitment, and leadership. And for that, we're all very, very grateful. On another note, I'll never forget the party that, Mary will remember this, I'm sure, that John and Mary threw for us all at their home in Studio City after Barack Obama was elected president in 2008. And it was complete with a life-size stand-up photo of the president-elect that we all got to take pictures of ourselves with it. On a final note, John's leadership at NTC was especially significant in the two areas that I've talked about, project management and our architectural and engineering practice. The two areas that really differentiated NTC as the leader in systems design and integration in the media and entertainment industry. These were skills that most of the other companies that were our competitors didn't have, and that we wouldn't have had without John taking the time to make sure we had them. His gentle manner and thorough and meticulous project work contributed mightily to NTC's success. And we're very, very grateful for his many contributions. So thank you all for coming. It's a tribute to how many people love and care for him.
Hi, I'm Bren Wagoner, and John was a dear, dear and cherished friend for almost 50 years. So the first time I encountered John was in the bathroom line, the potting line of the Century City 10K in the late 70s. And as runners would do, we struck up a conversation. Have you done this run before? Is the course flat? What are the hills like? And then the Andy Gump opened up, and that was the extent of it. Many weeks later, my husband Jim and I were at Leo Carrillo State Beach, and I looked down the shoreline, and there was a very familiar face. It was the man from the Century City 10K. He was with someone, and what was I going to do? Say, hey, hi, I'm the lady from the Century City 10K potty line. And so, but I commented to my husband, wow, isn't it sort of weird that I would see this fellow like twice in all of Los Angeles, like just by happenstance? Hi, okay. Straight out, gotcha. And so the story doesn't end there. Fast forward, it's many, many weeks later, and my husband and I are at a dinner party, and I look across the table, and here's a familiar face. And I say to him, you look really familiar to me. And he said, you look familiar to me as well. And so then we started this litany of, do you work here? Do you work there? Do you belong to this gym? We couldn't come up with any point of commonality. But I kept thinking, well, about the time dessert and coffee were served, it came to me, Century City 10K. And he agreed, yes, that was it. Well, once again, we didn't exchange any contact information. But fast forward many months later, we were at a party at our good friends Jane Prather and Dick Healy's home. And who should be there? John, Aalto, and Mary. And this time I said, I think the cosmos wants us to be in one another's lives. And that is how John and I came to be longtime friends. Many months later, John gave me one of my most favorite gifts of my entire life. 4 lessons in the art of bread baking. Actually, it turns out the gift was actually from John and Mary's father, because Mary's father opened his home for these 4 lessons. And so John gave me this gift of bread baking. Now, you may all remember that during the pandemic, bread making became kind of a craze. And you couldn't find yeast anyplace. But you don't need yeast to make sourdough bread. So I called John, and sure enough, he had sourdough starter, and we met, and he gave me some sourdough starter. And at this time, I knew nothing about making sourdough bread. But what I should have known was that when John gave me that sourdough starter, it was like giving me a pet. It had to be attended to. You have to feed it. You have to care for it. And this starter came with a provenance. This was not any old starter. John shared with me that he had had this starter for 18 years and that it had come from Pennsylvania. And all I could think was, oh my gosh, am I going to kill this starter? So far, so good. So that was the start of a long and enduring friendship. But John wasn't just the consummate bread maker. He had many other talents and gifts, one of which was he was a very good writer. And he wrote 3 books, the first about Mary's father, Wally, the second about his own father, and the third about his mother and his aunt. And those books got published. What I really wish he would also have published were some wonderful vignettes that he wrote about the regulars on the bus when he had elected to ride the bus to and from work. Those were such delightful, delightful stories. Another cornerstone of John's life was fitness. And so in the beginning, we were runners. And in fact, I came with props, one of which is a photo of John and my husband in the Los Angeles Marathon. And I can't remember if it is my husband's first marathon or John's first marathon, but it was one of their first marathons. So I brought this because I thought Will and Mary might like to see it. Oh, phooey, I forgot. My husband and I were among the contingent that made the journey to Catalina for John and Mary's wedding. And so for those of you that were there, you may remember that going to Catalina was smooth sailing, but the return to LA was, oh my gosh. So I have the t-shirt that commemorated I survived John and Mary's wedding. And this t-shirt says, April 20th, 1985. And I have to tell you, there is a story why I still have this t-shirt. And it's not just that I'm a hoarder. So to get back to fitness, fitness was another cornerstone of John's life. In the beginning, as I've referred, we were runners. And then we segued into cycling because it's so much easier on the joints, and we were in our 70s by then. And so we formed a group that we called the Intrepids. And the Intrepids did many rides from Marina del Rey to Torrance Beach and back, and many rides along the Ojai bike path. And these rides were always punctuated with a stop for lunch and conversation and lots of laughter. And I don't know how John did it because he never said it explicitly, but somehow he encouraged us to live our life to the fullest, to be grateful and appreciative of the gift of vitality. And I just want to say his positivity was infectious. It's one of the qualities that most drew me to him and that sustained our friendship. He was a lifelong learner, and he inspired me to always be open to new ideas. I think someone from his SAGE group will speak to this, so I'll just pass over that and just say, go girl. Now this I'm going to read because I want to make sure I get it right, and I don't want to miss any of the words. John had a commitment to crossing political divides. And it wasn't merely a belief. It was something that he acted on. It was a mission that he lived. He understood the wisdom of Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, and he took it to heart. He worked to bring people together, whether through gatherings that he and Mary held at their home, or through community projects that he joined in that united individuals from all walks of life on both sides of the political divide. He believed in the power of dialogue, understanding, and shared experiences, and he created the spaces where those values could flourish. John already has been and will continue to be deeply missed. I hope to honor him by living out the values that he cherished: to be fit, to eat well, to embrace connections that make us all human, and to stand for unity, peace, justice, and equality. I love you, John, and I miss you.
As many of you know, John Aalto possessed an abundance of wonderful attributes. A quick list, I would say, includes his generosity, his enormous curiosity, his passion for learning, and for reinventing himself in so many ways. I want to tell you some of my experiences with these John Aalto qualities, and instead of 4 minutes, I would like 40. Oh, well. First, his generosity. I met John on December 25th, 1980, and that maybe beats most of the people on that list over there. Okay, at a Christmas orphan party at his pad in Silver Lake, which overlooked the entire city of Los Angeles. I had hitchhiked on an invitation from another invitee, a friend of John's. As a fellow Midwesterner, John was keenly sensitive to the plight of orphans in search of a Christmas hearth and home. So, of course, he generously shared his. And when I say hearth, I can smell the bread and the pizza and whatever he was baking on any visit that we would have over the next 45 years. At the party, the Christmas party, he and I learned our mutual love of running. And soon Sunday mornings were devoted to running around Balboa Park and sundry other jaunts. This happened over the next 10 years, including training for and running the 1985 Culver City Marathon, my only one, his third of countless ones. The best part of these runs were the bottomless conversations. John's curiosity was insatiable. Although lamentably, engineers are often seen as not the most psychologically minded folks, preferring more to the pragmatics of solving problems, as in, if you have a problem, ask an engineer. John was different. That is also certainly true of John. He was very capable that way. However, he was also abounding in fascination in my field, psychotherapy, today 50 years in practice, where problems are almost never truly solved. That's a joke. Anyway, John wanted to hear everything about what it was like to be to have been spent so much time as both a therapist and as a patient, myself having racked up 17 years on the couch, actually in 2 different couches. After endless talks about each of our intimate and private minds, John jumped into his own psychotherapy and in no time had evolved into a full psychoanalysis of his own involving several sessions a week. John's penchant for learning was evident in courses of all sorts of subjects that grabbed him, and especially in his love of his book group. I always would hear fascinating things about the book of the month, but also about the members, how much he loved all of you, and how he wanted to be available when needed to any of you. Now, John was truly a Renaissance man, as seen as an indefatigable fascination with word and text and what they mean, only rivaled by his fascination with how things, real things, worked. And could he make them work even better? He also loved music and theater. He studied. John was truly a Renaissance man, as in his indefatigable fascination with word and text and meaning, only rivaled by his fascination with how things, real things, worked and could be made to work even better. He also loved music and theater. He studied improv and studied writing. Dude, what a dude. John's athleticism was unbelievable. He ran and he ran until he ran his legs into the ground. But then he dove into the Harvard West Lake swimming pool at 6 a.m. every morning, and he swam and he swam and he swam right over the dam. He was an ice skater in Wisconsin, a skier in California. He was always fit and so handsome with that marvelous shock of hair. All of this made seeing him in the end almost unbearable. How cruel can nature be? Although we were very much in each other's lives for the first 10 years, including that with our wives, Mary and Marcia, neither of whom we knew even when John and I met. A fateful turn occurred in January of 1991 that changed everything. On a ski trip in Deer Valley, where Marcia and Mary were involved in the Sundance Film Festival, I had a bad skiing accident. It ended not only in my skiing days, but also our running. That same that same month, our daughter was conceived. You can read about it in the Bible. Then, born in September 25th, 1991, and a year later, September of 1992, I started my second doctoral program in psychoanalysis. The absence of our intense routine connection was hard for both of us. And our get-togethers as couples almost ground to a halt. But then, one day, Marcia and I were taking a trip up Dixie Canyon, riding around, and we ran into John. More of that cosmic consciousness stuff. Out running, of course. It was wonderful to see each other, and as it turned out, it was the day of the Oscars. Suddenly, we agreed to get together that night. I'm not sure whose house it was, but from that year forward, we've met every Oscar night since. Talk about ritual. We swapped years of hosting, but we always feasted and drank heartily. And we also picked up the pace of other gatherings, holidays, etc. This past March, our ritual Oscars was at John and Mary's house. We'd seen John at a New Year's Eve party in January at our house, and he was full of piss and vinegar. There's always a bypass. His hair fully regrown. But by Oscars, he was noticeably less of both. When we reached out in May, offering to bring food and drink and visit, we arrived to see John in his wheelchair in a state of what in our biz is called the real. The real is death. And in this case, death seemed imminent. It was the last time I saw John. It might be strange sounding, but the words that came to my mind as I wrote this it was exquisitely painful. Something so shocking, but so real, beyond the illusory worlds we try to live in most of the time. Weeping, John said to me, I hate so much that I'm losing my family, Mary and Will, my friends, you and Marcia, and so many more. He cataloged the palpable sense of how unfair this was, especially for an extraordinarily full and robust and fit man. How unfair to be cut short, so short relative to the force of nature John always exuded. I leaned over and I said, John, you are not losing us. We are losing you. Wherever you may go or be, or whatever, those of us still on this side of whatever will be profoundly remembering and speaking of you and sharing our sense of our loss of you. John and I wept together, and I sensed we both felt relief in what I had just spontaneously spoken. When Marcia and I drove home, an idea occurred to me that was, I'm losing a forever friend. What does that mean? Well, while I've lost lots of people in my life, many dear to me, those relationships had mostly lessened or dissolved through a multitude of things that lends to relationships now being held more historically, sometimes perhaps nostalgically. But my sense with John was he and I would forever be 10-minute drive away, certainly for as long as we both live. Then death came so quickly, with such a shock, that it shattered that sense of my forever friend, now gone forever, at least in a material sense of being. But as today is testimony to this memorialization, John remains with us. So may we celebrate his life and share our gratitude for having been a part of it.
It was intimidating. I first met John in 2010 while swimming in a master's class at the Harvard Westlake pool. Since we both swam about the same speed, and that would be really slow compared to all the 20-somethings at the other end of the pool, we shared a lane. And as a result, we shared many a great conversation about books and politics and life in general, and so a great friendship began. Then, John brought me into an even greater circle of friends, where he invited me to join a big book club, and I will always be grateful to him for that invitation. Now, this was not just any book club. This book club started in 1978. He joined it in 80. And since that time, the club has read 370 books. You might have seen pictures of them going from young people to who we are today throughout the years. And so much has been shared at those meetings. Patty, who's here, and Pearl and Larry, Jane, Bob, and I are now all that remain of a club that has waxed and waned over a period of almost half a century. For many years, the book club met at different members' homes throughout the LA and Ventura counties. John, ever thoughtful and environmentally aware, would always offer to drive a carpool, and I would always accept, especially since it meant it ensured good company, and it gave me my first ride in an electric car. I have a favorite picture in front of my house of a mom and her child sitting on the ground in front of a little free library. I really wanted a little free library, but there's not a chance in the world that I had the skills to build one, or at least one that would hold up for a day or two. John built that little free library for me. And now that library is a source of books and love of literature for my entire neighborhood. When COVID hit, we began meeting by Zoom, organized by, John, of course. On Zoom, it became really obvious how well John looked after the group. He was always the one to make certain that everyone in the group got the opportunity to add their insights to the discussions. One great thing about the group is the range of viewpoints. I mean, sometimes I wouldn't even like a book, but after listening to others, I would realize that the book had more to it than I had thought. It was usually John's insights, however, that was the most interesting and were the most thoughtful. When we were finally able to meet in person, many members of the group had moved away. So thanks to John's computer and technology skills that I think went down another generation, John and Mary's home became the place we've met for the last few years, so everybody could easily participate either in person or by Zoom. We also got to eat his great bread and pizza. He spread out into pizza too. My last meeting with John was horrifying and moving. It was him showing me how I could host the Zoom meeting without him. And yes, it all worked. And we had a meeting. Boy, it's not the same without John. Earlier this year, I admitted in one of our meetings that whenever I opened my news feed, I was secretly hoping to read Trump's obituary. John looked at me with a shocked expression on his face, and I realized that John would never wish such a thing upon anyone, not even Trump. That's because John was a better person than I was. Now, that's sort of an astonishing thing to recognize, because we all think we're good people, right? But some of us are better than others. I realized I should try to be more like John. In fact, the world would be a whole lot better place if more of us tried to be more like John. And I know I speak for everyone here. God damn, I'm going to miss that man.
All right, so I first met John at the ABC Prospect Studios years and years and years ago, before NTC. I was doing some work over there. I met John, I met Peter, I met Chuck, a number of other folks, and because I was doing some work over there. So John was always pleasant. He was always very helpful. No matter what information I needed from him, he was always good at it. And he was present, professional, willing to help where needed, because sometimes over in a lot like that, there were things that just didn't make a whole lot of sense. So John helped me figure it out. After a number of years, I started working at NTC, and lo and behold, there was John. But then again, there was Peter, Chuck, and Elliot also. But the honest truth is that John and I really didn't work that much together on a daily basis or even a weekly basis. I was working on implementation, he was working on design, architecture, and things like that. But when I needed help, I would go to John, and we'd have great discussions. And I think that, you know, what Chuck had said earlier about John helping the company, I think he made us all better people because he taught us how to think about things. So as our years passed, you know, our relationship grew. We talked about politics, we talked about family, we talked about the world in general and how the world is going or not going. And then some of us sort of melded together on our own. So there was Diane, and who was the controller, and myself and John, and then we would get together with Bill and Kathy and Mary after some of the meetings that we would go to, the Christmas parties and things like that. We sort of became a gang of three. So every once in a while you would find us all huddled together somewhere talking about what's going on, or, you know, some of the politics and things like that. So we had a great time. So after we left, we all stayed in touch, and we would do Zoom calls like we were just talking about a couple of minutes ago. And those went on even like almost on a monthly basis, especially during COVID, because we certainly couldn't get out and see anybody. So we would have a Zoom call roughly once a month. We would sort of catch up on what we were doing. And after Zoom, then we started getting together again. So the six of us would get together. We'd go to various restaurants. We'd come to the house, you know, things like that. And we always had a lot of fun. We always had a lot of great conversation. We talked about our kids and what our kids are doing and what our lives are like. And then what are we going to do in retirement? And John would always talk about, well, you know, you need to get more into learning more, and his whole learning thing. And it was really inspiring to learn how to basically learn more things. And then, you know, John would talk about his volunteering, you know, with the Animal Society, and he was writing his book. And we talk about genealogy, because I'm working on some genealogy for our family, which is about 400 people and about 9 generations. So we would compare notes on how all that worked. But, you know, aside from the paperwork, you know, John was just a really great guy. He was really smart, and when I say really smart, he was really smart. And, you know, sometimes you get jealous of people like that, but I wasn't jealous of him. I just found it fascinating. It's like, how do I get to be that smart? You know, it's like, I'm not a dumb guy, but it's like, geez, you know, he knows so much about the world and how things work. And, you know, he has all these great groups of friends and family. And I found all of it so fascinating and inspiring. And I think overall, you know, we're all better people because of John. You know, NTC, the people at NTC, you know, his friends, his group of friends, his book clubs, his bread, you know, and all those kinds of things. And I think it just makes a better person. And we're all better people because of people like John that come into our orbit during our lifetimes. And it's a great thing. And I think we all need to be more appreciative of some of the people that come into our lives during our lives. So basically, that's all I have to say, and I will turn it over to the next person. But thank you for listening.
When I was asked to talk, the first thing that crossed my mind is, why me? Yeah, I know John, but I'm not the president of SAGE. Ed, who's sitting out there, a former president, is here. Joanne, where are you, Joanne? I think Joanne had to leave. She's our current president. But what you might not know is that 2 years ago, we were sitting at a 4th of July party over at Joanne's house. And I had the honor of sitting with John, who was way in the back in the corner, and Mary, and my friend Arlene was there too. And we spent just a wonderful time. So I'm wondering, Mary, is that why I'm speaking today? Where are you? Is that why? Okay. Thanks a lot. And I will tell you, at that time, all John kept saying is, recruit Mary. She'd be great at Sage, but she's not retired yet. So we're going to definitely hold on to that. I better put my glasses on because I won't be able to read. Okay, that being said, I'm really honored today to represent Sage Learning in Retirement. John was a cherished member of our Sage community for over 5 years. Who are we? Well, we're a group that's affiliated with CSUN. That's Cal State Northridge for those of you that don't live locally. And we provide lifelong learning and social activities in the greater San Fernando Valley. By the way, whoever's here from Sage today, just raise your hands. We've got a bunch, and several had to leave, so it gives you an idea of how well he's loved. I really feel rude. I'm going to stand back here. Okay. Sorry. Sorry, guys. Okay. You'd think that I would follow directions better. I know. Okay, I apologize for that. Restart. Anyway, John brought so much more than just attendance to the classes and events that we held. He brought energy, spirit, and a sense of purpose that lifted everyone around him. He assumed a variety of memorable roles while he was at Sage. Whether he took on the role, and I love this, I called him the CEO, and he called it our Sage Studios recruitment video. Many of you might not know that, but he referred to us as Sage Studios. He also was a starring actor in our Holiday Sage Players production. We did the 12 Angry Jurors, not the 12 Angry Men. We were jurors. And per our director, Cal, who couldn't make it today, but I think he might be on Zoom with us, he said that John gave a marvelous performance. He was juror number 3, which is, if you've seen the movie, he was the angry, he was the bully. And it was a role that was originated by Lee J. Cobb. And of course, as we all know, John was not a bully and not anything like the character he portrayed. He also participated in lively discussions at our study groups. He came to Sage events, like we mentioned, the July 4th party was one of them, or he simply just showed up with that unmistakable twinkle in his eye. He was a spark of joy that inspired us all. One of our other members, Dave, who couldn't make it today, wrote me a whole long page of stuff, and I told him I was going to plagiarize and steal some of his comments because I thought they were perfect. He remembered John as an intelligent, sensitive, and contemplative human being, which I thought was interesting. He said, I found out that John had been in the industry, that he was well-traveled, multi-talented, and witty. And I think a lot of you even attributed that to him. But Dave did share that it was when John attended class, he was wearing a woolen navy watch cap. And that was when he realized that John was quietly but heroically battling cancer. He approached everything with heart and humor. He left an indelible impression on all of us that were lucky enough to know him, and I think it's a tribute to everyone that's here today. I first had the opportunity to work with John and Emily on our Sage recruitment video. And by the way, I was the novice of the group. I had no experience like the two of them did. But this was way back in early 2024, and a special thank you to Ed Goldstein, who was our president. It was his vision, and I think he was the one that recruited John. Weren't you, Ed? Okay. He knew that he had the skills to make it happen, and he definitely did. Okay. Jerry Reish, who's also, where are you, Jerry? Somewhere here? Okay. He said it best. Thank you, Jerry. He said Sage needed a video to recruit new members. John spearheaded the project and produced 2 recordings, not 1, but 2 recordings, the likes of which Sage had never had in close to 4 decades of learning in retirement. We've been around since 1987. So this was truly a tribute to John. By the way, one was a 1 minute, one was a 4 minute. If anybody would like to watch them, I just happen to have some cards. So I'll share that with you. Anyway, let's move on. What you might not know is that we did get to share our Sage, the video, with our whole community at our holiday party last year. And Mary joined us, which thank you for coming, Mary. Where are you? You're hiding over there. Okay. I'll never forget something that John said during our filming. He said, "I think there's an Emmy in our future." Maybe there would have been, or will be. Dave also shared something that since Sages for Learning, I learned something. He said that the Latin motto for our Olympic Games is faster, higher, stronger. John's surname, Aalto, hints at taking one's family to a higher place by example. That's where we believe he's now reveling and sharing his gifts. Maybe John really deserves the Olympic gold medal. At least I think so. Most of all, we'll miss his spirit, a spirit that exemplified lifelong learning, deep friendship, and wholehearted living. John, you were truly loved, and you'll be dearly missed. Thank you for the light you brought into our community and all the people that are here today, and most importantly, the great legacy you've left at Sage. Thank you.
Thank you. And before Mary comes up to thank you all and say bonsoir, I wanted to mention one more thing that I forgot to talk about John at NTC. And that is his phone number, you will all remember, NTCers, was 265-4422. When John retired in 2014, years later, we hired a marketing director, and we made that number our sales line. And the phone rang one day. It rang on my desk and on her desk, and I answered it, and it was a voice that said, "Hello, John?" And I said, "No, I'm sorry, John retired a number of years ago." It was probably 5 or 6 at least. John retired a number of years ago. And the voice said, "Well, can I talk to Chuck Phelan?" And I said, "Well, you are." And that's just emblematic of how important John was for business development at the company. We used his phone number for it. And it actually worked because it was a former client that John had worked with, and he asked us to work with him in New York, and we did, and it turned into a pretty sizable project. So,
hi, I'm Jane Emery, or you may know me as Jane Prather, and we lived across the street from John on Van Nord. And you've left out something you may not know. So like neighbors, you know how you see each other, you wave, and you go over and immediately start talking. And before we knew it, we started talking about Finland. And John told a story about his family and how they all like to stand on their head, do headstands. And he'd say, my dad would say, headstand time, and they'd pop up. So guess what? We said, stand up, headstand. And John put his head down and popped up like you do. And I'll never forget that in his front lawn. So I don't know about the rest of you, and some of the relatives are here, but that was one of his specialties, headstands.
We're going to wrap it up. Please have people gather around and share your stories with them because there are a lot of them. I do want to thank, and if you get a chance, Ginger Immerman, her beautiful home. She cooked everything. If you get a chance, she's that adorable redhead with her hair up behind the island over there. I'm glad you said it was adorable. Adorable. And a hard worker. She's amazing. So if you get a chance, say hello. Thank you so much for being here. It has been so meaningful for all of us that you showed up and shared this with us. So thank you so much. Oh,